important that people who either firmly or even slightly support the ICE raids in our cities and the domestic deployment of the US military against civilians understand just how expensive it is. The Cato Institute, which is a cold-blooded, calculating, libertarian think tank that leans conservative, stepped up and put some numbers around what's happening. For starters, they estimate that the expansion of border enforcement is going to cost an incremental $1 trillion over the next decade, something like 5 times what Congress has formally estimated. This is partially because, as they say, it neglects the more significant cost of removing immigrants who would have paid more in taxes than they received in benefits, which, if you're looking at the people who entered the country during the Biden era alone, would have lowered the deficit by $897 billion over the next 10 years. We're already spending a tremendous amount of money on the border, almost an incomprehensible amount, more than all other law enforcement spending combined. Border spending is 36 times the budget that the IRS gets to pursue tax and financial crimes. But here's what that chart looks like after the bill. One of the things that they want to do is spend $8 billion on 10,000 more ICE agents. That's math, $800,000 per agent to remove people who are a net positive for our economy in the deficit. That's right. Now, what we're seeing here with a militarized, anonymous, plainclothes law enforcement agency with billions in backing and virtually no accountability is an example of a concept called the imperial boomerang by a thinker named Aimé Césaire, who connected the atrocities committed by the Nazis in Germany to the violence that colonial powers in the West were visiting on foreign populations. The idea is that the same methods of control, power, and force that a country uses outside its borders will eventually be turned inward on its own people. Spencer Ackerman writes in Zeteo, quote, "In the arrival of Black Hawk helicopters, mass surveillance tools, and the federalized California National Guard to LA, Césaire would have seen the fingerprints of the so-called US war on terror." Obviously, we know the Marines were then sent in. Mission accomplished. This is particularly noteworthy in the context of an issue like immigration, because many immigrants come from countries that have already been destabilized by that very same US military intervention. And I say all this not because somebody should have to be an economic contributor to deserve safety, but because it's cold, hard financial proof that none of this is about saving the taxpayer money, making a better life for people, boosting the economy, creating jobs. It is about white nationalism.